our session. So basically throughout the whole event, it's kind of looking at emerging tech. So that's what we're kicking off here. And our speakers in this session, so we always like to have an analyst to kick us off. So in this session, that's Matt Boon, who's the Senior Research Director at Dept. We're then crossing over to Paul Devlin, who's the Sports Enterprise Lead for AWS. Vinay Samuel, who's the founder and CEO of Zetaris. Dhruv, who's Senior Director of Enterprise and Public Sector Netapp. And then Michelle Lin, who is Chair of the Commpete, which is the Competitive Carriers group, is on her way, so she will sneak through at some point. So I'll pass over to Matt to kick us off. Sorry, before we go, for those that don't know how this session works, pretty much everyone up here will give a kind of 5-minute talk, and then they'll drop down onto the tables, and you'll get to speak. You'll get to spend 10 minutes with each of them in a kind of speed dating type fashion. So look forward to that. So Matt, thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. I'll just grab my trusty clicker. Thank you, perfect. All right, welcome, good to see everybody. I've only got 5 minutes, so I'll be fairly quick. So I want to spend a little bit of time just quickly telling you about Dept. But firstly, we've got this looming sort of economic downturn, economic headwinds, whatever you want to call them. And at the same time, we're being, again, challenged to raise the level of innovation within Australia in general. We were lagging before the pandemic. We haven't necessarily accelerated that level of innovation. So what I want to talk about today is emerging tech under threat? What are some of the realities around emerging tech, particularly as we think about innovation? But I guess firstly, what do I know, right? And what does Dept know as we think about this challenge of whether deployment of emerging tech is under threat in Australia? Now, we're actually in our 12th year. We're 60 associates strong in Australia, Australian organisation. We've grown 40% from a revenue and people point of view over the last 2 years in spite of the pandemic. So really growing very, very strongly. From a press point of view, how we serve you, we basically gather insights from a community of 3,000 tech and business leaders across Australia, 10,000 interactions every year. Typically, the surveys we conduct represent that organisations representing about 25% of Australia's GDP and greater than 1 million employees. I've engaged with many of you, and we typically do respond to press requests within hours. I've got there on average 118 minutes from request to actually delivering insights to you. We're across the media, many of the publications represented here today. Really, when you're looking for fact-based examples of what organisations are doing within the local marketplace to help you sort of fuel your stories in general. That then feeds into the Dept research and advisory offering, which is why I joined Dept after about 18 years at Gartner. So we're a full-service Australia First research company focused on innovation, security, customer experience, data, cloud, and so on. So really covering those key areas of focus for many organisations. As we think about emerging tech in Australia, now we heard from Anthony earlier on, really gives us a great sort of sense and grounding of what's happening. We'll get much more from a tech point of view as well. I want to bring it back to the business a bit more. So when we think about emerging tech in Australia, there's probably 3 things I want you to consider. Firstly, companies continue to invest in technology, but really with a view towards how it can help them deliver value back to the organisation, back to the business, deliver differentiated experiences. And emerging tech is really at the forefront of how organisations are looking to invest in tech to drive change within their organisations. The pandemic, as we surveyed organisations, did see an increased desire to invest in emerging technology to drive innovation. But 2.5 years later, we've actually seen that appetite wane to some degree. So the innovation is again lagging where it needs to be from an Australia point of view. Having said that, emerging technologies are again seen as one way to accelerate that innovation. And at the end of the day, when we think about innovation and we think about emerging tech, it's fundamentally always coming back to what is the value we can derive from those investments and those deployments. And the one thing I think which is common, and we heard about this earlier on, obviously from Anthony, we're all very well aware of this, when we look at this concept of how can we modernize effectively and smartly, how can emerging tech help us with that? Talent shortages, 72% of organizations that we surveyed said that talent shortage was the top barrier to them being able to modernize within their organizations. So really big focus on how can emerging technology help us in some ways augment the talent shortage, but at the same time also free up resources, free up people within the organization to develop them into new areas to overcome some of those challenges. When you think about that in general, these are some of the challenges that we're seeing organizations are facing in delivering world-class employee experiences. So if the talent shortage is the number one barrier to us being able to modernize effectively, really execute on our digital transformation stories or strategies, these are the things that are holding us back from a talent point of view. Legacy processes, legacy mindsets, so old ways of working, old technologies, old ways of doing things in general. This is all going to be paid for. So the positive news earlier this year was that we do expect an increase in budgets in 2022. However, in talking to organisations at the moment, we're seeing a real sort of slowdown in terms of investment expectations. Again, coming back to some of those key business priorities, and then thinking about how some of these emerging technologies listed here can actually help us achieve some of those objectives. So I'll finish very quickly, very soon. RPA, robotic process automation, is probably one of the areas of investment we're seeing deployed most heavily within organizations because it can deliver direct and actionable sort of outcomes very, very quickly. We heard earlier about quantum, very low levels of piloting and adoption right now for all the reasons we heard. However, it's increasingly becoming more about a technology conversation than a science conversation than ever before. But that's my 5 minutes. Very quick fire hose there. Thank you very much. Okay.
I'm from Northern England and I can't talk fast, so I'll try to squeeze this into 5 minutes. My name's Paul Devlin. I lead sport at AWS in this region. I'm very passionate about sport. I've played for 10 years, coached for 10 years, and been in sports tech for about 15. And AWS is doing a heap of stuff in sport across the world, so I wanted to show you a quick video.
Watch the game the way you
some of the things that are going on around fan
Want
engagement.
to improve your basketball IQ or get insights for your fantasy team? Turn on player mode, where you'll see the game from the perspective of a point guard and see passing and shooting opportunities as they happen, plus dynamic scoring probabilities and useful stats. Or try coach mode, where plays are literally diagrammed on your screen in real time as they happen. Just want the game to be fun? Check out mascot mode with filters and animations, perfect for sharing across social channels. And of course, there's broadcast mode. Pick up to 7 different angles to watch all the action. Baseline, center court, backboard, sidelines, and more.
What's cool is that was 18 months ago. And so you can imagine the speed of technology, and we're hearing, the keynote this morning just blew my mind. The speed of technology and transformation, our customers are really innovating at an insane speed. But I want to go forward. This is a lot of the customers that we're working with. We work right across content creation, broadcast, distribution, production in the cloud. But today I want to talk about fan engagement. If you're not a fan of sport, you can absolutely relate this to going to the theatre or going to a concert, for example. So if you just quickly whiz back to the 2000s, all of the revenue generation for sports teams and leagues was around the in-venue experience. So it was merchandise sales, food and beverage sales, it was tickets. There was absolutely no data and analytics produced. You were lucky if you got the highlights on, it was match of the day in England on a Saturday night for the football. There was no interaction with the players, certainly no social engagement. And you fast forward to now, where we've got so much data collection. We know from talking to our customers that we've got 3 fan segments. And we know also that there's 3 different interactions they have with their favourite teams, players, and clubs and leagues. And that is experiences, data and insights, and social interactions, be it with the players directly through social, be it with the teams, or be it with the leagues. What we do hear all the time is that personalization is the key. We know attention spans are reducing in the younger generations, and so we know that they want personalization. There's a lot on this slide. I'm certainly not going to go through it all within this short period, but you'll pick out the individual parts. The key takeaway is personalization is going to happen in the 1 to 5 year time frame I'm referring to here, right from the minute you look to buy tickets, to your journey getting to the game or event, during the game or event, after and in between games. Some examples of that are augmented reality, where we're seeing augmented reality ability to find your seat in the venue. And if, for instance, you might be at a Marvel stadium, maybe a Marvel character takes your kids to their seat using augmented reality. The ability then for the data analytics that are craved by the modern customer to direct your camera at a player on the pitch, it identifies who he is or her, and gives the data insights in real time for that game. There's lots of different data points around highlights and video content. So we know that TikTok's enormous these days. Getting the highlights directed straight to your mobile device, whether you're in venue, to watch a replay of a goal or a match event from different angles, from an angle that you choose. So putting the production in some ways in the hands of the user is something that we're seeing a lot of. And then another area that I've seen most recently of super excitement, but maybe I'm talking to the 5 to 10 year, although maybe with quantum computing it's even quicker. I'm working with a company at the moment who optically track players on the field and referees. So they track 15 different points on every human on the field, and they also track the pitch, in this case football. What they're able to then do from that data is render every player in 3D, okay, 3D pose estimation. What they can then do is render the stadium using, say, an Unreal gaming engine, so that you can create a 3D immersive environment where potentially you put goggles on or some form of headset, and you can watch a match event from any position you want at all. Now, I wonder what happens in the future, and I certainly see this and it's craved, to be able to do that in real time. And then one other section is volumetric video can be created from there, whereby you may have seen the ABBA concert recently using volumetric video. Well, there is a desire within lots of sports I talk to be able to project volumetric video onto your kitchen table and sit around and watch the game with your mates, or to be able to do that with a headset on using volumetric video as well. Just over 5 minutes, apologies. Thank you very much.
Hi folks, I'm Vinay Samuel. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Zetaris. We're an Australian company, started in a garage in Essendon. We're an Australian company and we're disrupting the data analytics and big data platform world. Sounds like a big mission. What we're doing is, let me ask people in the audience, who knows what a data warehouse or a data lake is? Great, awesome. Okay, so companies like Snowflake, Databricks, AWS have data warehouses, and the reason we have data warehouses and data lakes is because we want to do all this great personalization stuff. We want to bring data together from different parts of our business so that we can view it in the same context and make decisions, and we want to do that as fast as possible. Well, to do that, it costs a lot of time and a lot of money. Banks, telcos, retailers have hundreds and if not thousands of databases. Zetaris has worked out a way to actually do the same analysis without having a data warehouse or a data lake. We actually take the query to the data rather than bringing the data to where the query gets done. And so our product is called the Network Data Platform to do instant analytics on any data anywhere. And we believe we're following a trend that's been actually going for quite some time, about 30 years, from the infrastructure cloud to the application cloud to where we are today, which is the data cloud. We believe the future is about the networked cloud, the multi-cloud, perhaps doing queries on data in a permission way or permission-based way, data on the customer's device compared to data inside an analytical store. So, is that working? So very quickly, most organizations look like this today in terms of their data management. They copy and paste data across their infrastructure, through their clouds, through their data centers, from their origination systems or source systems. We take the query to the data. We eliminate that centralization of data. We take out months, if not years, of integration time from doing analytics. And when we do that, we actually improve the data quality. basically the Zetaris software goes to where the data is and in real time joins it and creates a single view. In a way, we're disrupting the notion of cloud. We can bring the cloud to the data center. It's a big problem, and as we all know, data is proliferating everywhere. We see this issue of data proliferation just driving the need for this this ability to do a decentralized data platform. We're actually working with all the logos that you guys are familiar with in the IT industry, people who've invested in centralization technology. As we go forward into 2025, we'll have to now work out how they actually provide technology that is decentralized. And we are, one of our strategies is to embed our technology in some of the logos that you're seeing here. It's possible now because technology has changed. It hasn't been possible, or wasn't possible about 7 years ago. With new changes in technology, we were able to do this real-time join without breaking the networks, without breaking the source systems. So I won't cover this, but we've got a beautiful application. There's many parts to it, and it's as I said, the innovation happened in Australia, and we're taking this innovation to America. We've just started about 3 months ago out of Palo Alto. We've hired some people. We already have pilots with banks, telcos, and retailers there. The depth and the disruptive nature of our technology has caught the eye of the US government, and the CIA is one of our investors. And so this technology is set to change the information management landscape. It's a step change in the way data architects think about managing data. No longer do I use the word ingest. No longer do I use the words move. I decide where the data is. I look at the schema or a virtual version of the schema of where the data is, and I work out the join points in real time. It takes months and zeros of the money it takes today to do data analytics. So just a little bit about our company. We've recently raised $32 million. Ultimately, we are building what's called a real-time query director. My belief is that it's no longer important where the data is. No longer will we say the ruler or the master of the universe is the company that owns the data. You know, all these vendors want you to move your data to their universe. No longer will we say that. We'll say the master of the universe owns the query, and that query is processed in a way that is cognizant of where all the different data points are across the network, inside and outside the company. So that's us. Thank you very much.
I've only got one slide. Thank you, Matt, or Vinay. That was very fascinating. Has everyone heard of Netapp other than the swag that's on the table here? Not a supplier of swags, that's okay. I'll talk about who Netapp is. We are a company that's in the high technology industry, been around for 30 years. We started off as a disruptor to take on the Sun Microsystems and the IBMs of the world, and then rode some innovation waves in the 2000s with virtualization, what we saw with all flash in the data center, and now with cloud. And my name, Dhruv Dhumatkar, Director of the Enterprise and Public Sector Business here at Netapp in ANZ. And my role has exposed me to organisations across many industries, government, public sector, in Australia primarily, but overseas as well. And I thought I'd share a couple of observations here around the future of tech, or really how the workforce will adapt to it. And the keynote I thought today was fascinating. Who thought it was actually quite insightful? Hopefully everyone did. And there was a few emergent themes that were spoken about, which in my experience is pretty much true. You know, the advancement of artificial intelligence, analytics, quantum computing, Internet of Things. But those trends in itself are academically interesting, but if you combine them with two hyper themes that I've learned from many conversations with customers, I think that's where we get into a fundamental shift in society. The first hyper theme, I think, is the generational shift in the workforce. And what I mean by that is by 2025, about 60% of our workforce will be the millennial and Gen Z group. So they'll be replacing pretty much all of us. I'm not saying all of us are here from the baby boomer and the Gen X generation, but they will become the dominant part of the workforce. And by 2025, they will actually be in key decision-making roles. They're a highly digital generation, digitally savvy generation, and their drivers for work loyalty or loyalty to an organisation that they work for are very different to what many of us, what drive many of us. And so I think as the generations shift, we will see a highly digital generation, and organisations will look to bridge the divide in the skills gap by bringing on these younger workers who are technologically more savvy in theory than all of us. The second theme, I think, is the C word, cloud. And the reason I raise that is because when I look at the true innovators, the ones who spend over $100 billion a year in R&D, it's AWS, it's Microsoft, and it's Google. And they're able to innovate in a way that an organisation like a bank or a health care provider or anyone else is just unable to do, just cannot match that scale. So when I look at cloud, I don't look at the meme that says someone else's computer. I look at the sheer innovation that those organisations are delivering, and for governments and private sector enterprises to be able to tap into that. And so as we proceed over the rest of the decade, what I see is the generational shift and the advent of innovation through the cloud will fundamentally change the way we work. Let me give you a couple of examples before my 5 minutes is up. The first is a company, a partner of ours, Rio Tinto, that they were raised in the keynote. They've got an enormous amount of sensors on their heavy haulage trucks. And those sensors, those IoT sensors, collect an enormous amount of data back to their centralized repository to manage engine wear, tyre wear, things like that, because they've realized it's far cheaper to, to address a challenge with their truck, be it mechanical, be it tyres, be it anything else. I'll be 30 seconds. In a workshop, as opposed to out on the field where they have to move it back into the workshop. The other one is in the healthcare industry, where we're working with AstraZeneca. And through deep learning and artificial intelligence, they've been able to program their systems to detect breast cancer cells at far greater accuracy than any oncologist. And that's it for me. If there's any questions, I look forward to talking with you. Thanks very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Lim, Chair of Commpete. Commpete is an alliance for competition in digital communications, and we're representing the non-dominant telecommunication providers here in Australia. A little bit different to the rest of the speakers today, but the next 6 to 12 months will be game-changing for Australia's telecommunications landscape. We're likely to witness the biggest shift since the deregulation of the sector 30 years ago. The political, economic and societal interest in telecommunications is strong, and so it should be. Telecommunications is not just a handful of engineered networks we can set aside to be dominated by a select few and controlled by their own commercial and shareholder interests. Communications is a backbone which underpins Australia's global future. In Compete's view, it should increasingly be elevated and its public profile treated accordingly. And we appreciate your efforts and appreciation and support to date. People need to communicate as a basic need. The past few years has shown us just how much we rely on effective communication to keep us safe and connected, particularly as the country has battled extreme weather events and successive lockdown periods. However, the changes, complexities and trends as a whole in digital communications means that it extends beyond many political portfolios in the current government. It will not go away as party platforms in the future elections. It is a core consideration to how small businesses and major corporations must choose to both set up and run their operations across all industries. It is a vehicle which assists in paving new paths for economic opportunity and prosperity, and increasingly plays a role in consumer welfare and social inclusion for Australians. It is both an essential utility and at a macro level is a driver of productivity in Australia's digital economy. Digital communication now infiltrates our lives and, like energy, the Australian telecommunications industry is a complex one with many layers, but it can be more competitive for the benefit of all Australians. This is a pivotal year for communications regulation in Australia to set out the competitive market structure for decades to come. The decisions afoot in relation to the NBN SAU special access undertaking and the Telstra TPG spectrum merger transaction alone could lead to, if not managed appropriately, an outcome where the two core communication platforms are controlled by two providers, namely NBN Co and Telstra. After 30 years, we could turn a full circle on telecommunications market dominance and alarmingly the potential capture of regional communications at a time when we should be encouraging competition. In Compete's view, this is a problem now and in the long term for future generations. Fixed voice networks are traditionally highly regulated with the objective to encourage a more level playing field. Mobile is not. They are almost polar opposites, and in Compete's view, this is a problem. Over-the-top services, on the other hand, is good for competition and consumer choice, and it should be encouraged. Today, I'd like to highlight a few key points in relation to the NBN SAU mobile and over-the-top services. Compete acknowledges the revised SAU submitted by NBN Co. However, administrators have recently signalled the biggest opportunity lies in sending NBN Co. back to the drawing board to reconsider historical concepts, such as the ICRA, which was a key component towards meaningful reform. Frankly, it is crazy that the NBN's biggest return-generating asset is not the $27 billion it has spent building the network, but the $32 billion in accumulated losses. Long-term losses of this sort can never be recovered without impacting appropriate wholesale pricing, and this has a flow-on effect to consumers. The ICRA is not forecast to be recovered within the life of the SAU, which is under the new proposal is to remain in place until 2040. At some point, we do need to accept the commercial reality that long-term losses of this kind can never be recovered, and the only course is write-off. Incidentally, the Australian government spent around $89 billion on JobKeeper wage subsidies, and in Compete's view, fostering greater internet utilisation by making NBN usage more affordable yields enormous benefits for the Australian public. If NBN doesn't use his current review to revalue the ICRA, it is just kicking the can down the road for another decade. In the interim, it will continue to distort costs, prices and investment decisions across the industry and to the detriment of all users. Secondly, on mobile, Commpete is a strong supporter of neutral host mobile sharing models. Neutral host is a model whereby an independent owns both passive and infrastructure such as towers, as well as access to spectrum and RAN, and provides these assets to both retail and wholesale providers. Neutral hosting has many advantages in regional areas, and it certainly does deliver positive outcomes for regional Australia. There are key differences between the neutral hosting and the TPG Telstra proposal, where ownership is concentrated in the hands of a single provider. This is almost certain to stymie choice for Australians who will miss out on the benefits of competitive telecommunications markets, as it will further entrench ownership by a single, already dominant market player, one that has already raised its mobile prices in recent months. Speaking at the National Farmers Federation conference in April, outgoing Telstra CEO Andy Penn stated, "Regulatory open access just makes no sense and will kill the industry and lead to awful outcomes for Australian farmers. Compete disagrees completely. If this deal goes ahead, it will change the structure of the mobile industry forever. We will go from 3.5 networks a couple of years ago to 2.5, and in those circumstances, Commpete will be calling on the ACCC to do a review of competition in retail and, importantly, the wholesale markets." And finally, on OTT, the developments in over-the-top services are exciting. And this allows us to access the World Wide Web, and it's good for competition and good for consumer choice. Some mobile network operators are calling on government to tax some OTT players and give funds to the MNOs. Commpete does not speak for all of them, but our members, all telcos and OTTs, are part of the same ecosystem. OTTs are on one side of the market that create the demand for people to buy telco services. We're sceptical of the merits of calling for regulatory intervention in the absence of any actual market failure. We're also skeptics of the merits of OTTs being required to fund vertically integrated telco networks instead of, say, a neutral network operator that would actually promote greater competition throughout the ecosystem. So in closing, Australia does need to embrace a competitive mindset when it comes to telecommunication services. This is the only way we can ensure value, flexibility and choice for all Australians and keep this essential utility secure for the future generations. Thank you.